only
All right. I want to welcome everybody to the weekly webinar for the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. I'm James Berry. I'm at the HEALEY Center. I work very closely with Merit Skovic and Sabrina Paganoni. And I'll be leading part of the webinar today. It's so exciting to get to talk about the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. I don't get to be on all of these calls. I've been on a few in the past, but I'm really excited about today's program. Just to start, I would just say this continues to be an incredibly inspiring project that really is linking sort of every part of the ALS community together: researchers, people with ALS, loved ones, caregivers of people with ALS, funding agencies, philanthropy, trialists across the nation. Really incredible. Next slide. And so today, we're very excited to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Hristelina Ilieva, who leads the ALS Center, the Weinberg ALS Center at Jefferson University, and is one of our really successful platform trial site investigators. And we're excited to hear an overview of the site and updates about the site's activities. Dr. Ilieva?
Yeah, thank you for having me. We really appreciate all the hard work that was put in order to organize a trial of this dimension and pretty much to give patients with ALS and their caregivers a chance to participate no matter where they live in the country, because a lot of people, as you know, can participate either with you, with us, with multiple other sites. So it's really a very, very good initiative, and also an initiative that we hope will bear fruits, and we will have therapies as a result. So yeah, that's what I have to say. We started participation in the trial back in August, just as the country was opening. I'm very lucky to be supported by an excellent group of colleagues and people who work with us. So Dr. Piera Passinelli is the director of the center, and I work in very close collaboration with both clinicians and researchers. So Davide Trotti is the director, Dr. Davide Trotti is the director of research, and I'm supported by a group of young, enthusiastic, and talented people. So I work with Jessica Rinaldi, who is the Associate Director of Clinical Research, but I also have a few names in the clinical research team: Stephanie Hansen, Madeline Singson, Sophia Nastrik, Christopher Haig, and Melissa Warren. So we do have a net, like a group of really enthusiastic people, and that's what makes this early participation, because we were one of the early sites that joined you. So if I can kind of introduce the people with their faces in the next slide, you will see us surrounding patients. The patients are, of course, at the core of our center, but everyone has a role and everyone participates. Pretty much we have, besides the clinical activities, which are quite comprehensive, we have a physiatrist who is part of our clinic. We have a pulmonologist who sees our patients, physical therapy, occupational therapy, nutrition, speech. Also, we have very good support through our association with the ALS Association. We rely on them on social work support, also assistive technology support, and Gail Hausman is mental health nurse that also works and has worked for many years through the ALS Association with patients with ALS. We also have physician who comes periodically and helps us with difficult conversations of, goals of care and palliative care. So we have a palliative physician come as well periodically. And we have a very good and closely knit relationship with the research laboratories. There are 4 research laboratories at the center, and we have an ongoing biomarker project for which we are very grateful that patients are volunteering to provide, samples for those type of studies. Um, and basically, where we lack in terms of strength of medication, we try to provide in terms of symptomatic support and attention to the patient's needs. That's pretty much our philosophy on the clinical side. On the research side, we do think that marrying the two and having this sort of integral relationship between the research and the clinical part is what's going to help us move forward. And we are excited to work in this area. There's definitely no shortage of questions that can be asked in ALS research. And our hope, for what motivates us and what our goal is in the future is that one day this will become a disease no different than HIV, no different than cancer, where people will not have like a certain amount of time that they are with us, rather that they will be chronically with us. But whatever we give as treatment will be able to break the progression of the disease. And so we'll just have to catch people quickly enough, start successful, hopefully, therapies, and have them with us for many years. So that's the goal, and this goal can be achieved. We just haven't done that yet, but with enough resources, with enough enthusiasm and talented people, I think we can do that. And so to kind of tell you where we are in terms of numbers in Healy, we have, as I said, we started early. We're still enrolling as new patients come to our center. We currently have 11 active patients. They're distributed almost throughout the first 3 arms of the trial. We only have 1 patient for now in regimen D. We did have another patient in regimen D, but there was some issues with the medications they were on, so we had to switch to another regimen because of that. 5 of the patients have completed open label, have moved on, have completed double blind and have moved on to open label extension, and then 6 still remain in the double blind phase. Unfortunately, as this disease progresses, patients cannot always continue on to open label extension. And so with 2 of our patients, they completed double blind, but they couldn't follow with the open label extension because of their disease progressing. So that's pretty much us on, for who we are and what we do and what motivates us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the overview. I would just say, marking 1 year in the platform trial is amazing. That's an incredibly deep and dedicated team that you've outlined, and really an example of the synergy between care and research and how we move the ball forward for everybody. So thank you very much, and incredibly impressive, as somebody who also works in a clinic. Pulling these threads together takes a ton of work. It looks really, really amazing.
I mean, it speaks to the quality of the people I work with.
Well, and to the quality of the person that they work for as well. So thank you for sharing. So we'll take as we do, we'll take a few minutes and just go over the design of the platform trial. So the Healy ALS Platform Trial is what we call a perpetual adaptive trial with a shared placebo. And the way that works is we have if somebody consents, does an informed consent, that first red arrow, to join the trial, they then go through a screening period. At the end of that screening period, if they're determined to be eligible for the trial, They then are assigned to a regimen. That's kind of the next step. And then if they're assigned to a regimen, that's randomized. And so there are currently 4 different regimens, A, B, C, and D, that they could be randomized to. They would know which regimen they're participating in. That's not a secret. The next step is within a regimen to consent to that specific regimen and be randomized within the regimen. Now, because of the shared placebo, because each regimen gets to sort of reuse placebo from the other regimens, we can reduce the number of people in the trial who are receiving placebo, and we have a 3-to-1 randomization. What that means is that 75% of people in any arm are receiving active study drug, but because we pool the placebo across 4 arms, we actually have the same number of people getting treatment as on placebo for the analysis, which is a very statistically powerful way to do this. Regimen A is zilucoplan, regimen B is verdiperstat, regimen C is called CNM-Au8, and regimen D is perdopidine. All of them working through slightly different mechanisms, all of them really exciting. And the randomized portion is 24 weeks long, about 6 months. And after that, there is an open label extension in which participants who've been in any of these arms are invited, if they would like to continue taking that study drug. No randomization at that point. Everybody knows that they're getting that study drug. So that's what we call an open label extension. Next slide. So just enrollment updates as of today. We've had 676 people with ALS sign an informed consent. 534 have been assigned to a regimen. 482 have been randomized within that regimen. So some have not yet been randomized. Some were probably unable to be randomized, but mostly we're sort of waiting for people to filter through this and get further in the trial. 155 have completed the randomized controlled trial and are now in the open label extension. So if we look at each individual regimen, 130 have been randomized to within regimen A, 149 to B, 148 to C, and 55 to D. So D was added after the first ones began, and randomization within regimen D will continue until it's full, even after the other ones have closed. We're looking for about 160 per regimen, so we're really in a very exciting way getting close for some of these regimens. Anybody who is randomized who is assigned to the regimen will be randomized, so we may end up being a little bit over 160. That's fine. We've planned for that. Amazing. This speed of enrollment is just unparalleled within ALS. So really amazing. Next slide. So there are centers across the country. 52 sites are actively enrolling for the platform trial. We have a number of ways to find out information about participating sites. There's a QR code. If you just point your cameras, your smartphone's camera at that code, it will actually take you to the website that can tell you about the sites that are participating. And we hope that will be a fruitful way to find a site. When you get to the site, you can actually sort, and you can look by state, and you can find a center near you. Next slide. We have 2 really incredible, dedicated patient navigators who are here to help, because even getting to the right website, following a QR code, making sense of that website can be, we know that that's overwhelming. Catherine Small and Allison Boulat are truly thoughtful, humane, incredibly adept patient navigators who are, I have to say, I'm constantly amazed at their new ideas for doing this better, their ways of helping people, their ideas on sort of how we can really change the way that we think about connecting people with trials. And Allison is on the call. I just want to say thank you to Allison. Catherine can't be here today, but she has a similar role. You can email or call them. The phone is 833-HALT-ALS. The email is here, HEALEY ALS Platform @mgh.harvard.edu. There is also a tool that they have helped design that sort of helps understand the eligibility criteria and how you might fit into that. Again, there's a QR code here. If you point your phone's camera at it, it will take you to the website to fill that out. Next slide. These webinars are meant to sort of be updates about how things are going in the platform trial. And we welcome new ideas. We have some upcoming guest speakers. Michael Weiss, colleague at University of Washington in Washington State, will be speaking on the 12th. On the 19th, Laura Foster at University of Colorado. These are really dedicated site investigators and really making this happen. So it'll be great to hear updates on their sites as well. We've had webinars about biomarkers, about biostatistics, about get to know our sites. And we're always looking for more ideas. This is our community time to talk. And so we want to know from you, what would you like to hear about? Please send us your ideas. Next slide. So for a few more updates, these webinars are weekly. You can tune in next week for a similar one. There are schedule and registration links on the website. And there are also recorded webinars from the past, specifically the ones about drug mechanism of action and the science behind each of our regimens. And you can see the dates that all of these were from. The QR code will take you to the recordings of these. You can also follow the links to the recordings of these. So we're very excited to present these every week. One of the really important things that we do at the end is to answer questions. And so we have a few minutes to do that now.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. I'd be happy to ask the question if you're okay with going forward with that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Dr. Ilieva, the first question is for you. If you make it through regimen A, for example, are you only able to do the open label extension for that regimen, or can a patient decide another regimen for open label extension?
It's a fairly common question. As you know, the protocol is very clear about this, that once people are randomized, they kind of follow in the path that, they started. So if they did start as, regimen A, in the open label extension, they stay in regimen A as well. So I think that, this is also done for ethical purposes, because if you come to think about it, if someone, while we are doing the double blind, we don't know what patients are taking, but at least that's what I keep when I get this, or related questions. I keep telling people it's not ethical not to give people equal chance. So people that are able to get into the open label extension should at least get the same, chance to get the drug as someone else. So I think there's an ethical reason for this. And also statistical reason. I think that if people start moving from one regimen to another, it will be a statistician nightmare. So I think in order for us to have solid data, people are remaining in the same regimen.
Thank you.
Austin, I might just add one thing to that, which is that one of the things that is important to kind of look at is long-term safety of the medication. And so if we allow people, so when we allow people to go into the open label extension, and that's not just sort of, on the one hand, we think that's wonderful for participants. It's also a feature of the study so that we can really hasten the pathway to approval for drugs that are successful in the platform trial, because we'll have that long-term safety data that FDA requires. So really kind of a great win-win feature.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Definitely. Dr. Berry, this is kind of a tough one we hear a lot in the navigation area is, if a patient is progressing slowly, why doesn't that make them a great candidate for clinical trials?
Yeah, this is, well, first, obviously we're pleased when somebody is progressing slowly, and we would always hope that it was more slowly. We really designed this trial to be as sort of open as we could be, and we went back to all of the inclusion criteria that have been used in previous recent studies and distant past studies. And we asked the question, is this something that is important for the analysis of the trial? Or is it, or does it not really matter? Because it turned out that there were a lot of inclusion and exclusion criteria that were keeping people out of trials that didn't seem to really matter in the data analysis. And we have a pooled database that we can do ask some of these questions on. And so the questions that we asked had a little bit less to do with how rapidly people are progressing and more about how long they've had disease. And so if people have had the disease for a longer period of time, we had to ask the question, what happens to the statistics and to sort of the ability to find an effective drug? And so there is a cutoff around 3 years where we saw that we really began to kind of have a harder time detecting effective medications in the trial. And so that's how we came to those criteria, where we always are revisiting them to see if we can use statistical tools to try to loosen those criteria. But that's sort of how we ended up there.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ilieva, a question for you. A patient is asking, can I stay on open label extension all the way until we know if the drug is considered to be effective or not?
I think this is a question which sort of varies the answer based on which regimen the patient is, because of the makers, right? The makers of the medication. Some have been very committed and I think have indicated that they will continue to support patients until an FDA decision is made about the respective medication, but not all of them. So it's probably case by case. Yeah.
They do vary by regimen. The really remarkable thing is that all of the regimens have committed to the open label extension, which was really not the case years ago with these trials. And so that's really exciting. And I think all of them are committed to at least 6 months and committed to a time period that will at least allow for the analysis of those results. And so I think it gets us through a really critical period of sort of understanding what's going on. And I think that's a really
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it leads right into another related question that we've had is, if a patient is in an open label extension that perhaps doesn't go on as long as some of the other regimens, can they then join a different regimen's open label extension program?
Yeah.
I don't know that they can jump directly in the open label. If they still meet every other criteria, they can be re-randomized and start from the very beginning, where they will be again, meeting criteria for the master protocol screen, and then going to be randomized at, the other regimens that, they obviously have not participated in, and then eventually get to an open label extension. But I don't think that they can kind of like zigzag and join the open label directly. They'll have to kind of start from the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you. And Dr. Berry, question for you. Has there been promising success in any of the regimens so far that you're aware of?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great question. So first of all, anytime that there's a candidate therapy that's being considered for the trial, there's an evaluation committee that looks at all the evidence, both preclinical, that is in cell models or in animals, as well as any clinical experience, that is previous trials that may have gone on, or for a marketed drug, what's the experience on the market and what's safety look like. That committee then sort of, really ensures that the therapies that are going into the platform trial are ready for this kind of a trial and are really promising, because I think, we're asking people to take the chance that they go to any one of these arms. And so we want to feel very strongly that we want participants in any of these arms. That's really, really important. Once the trial is going, it's randomized, and we don't really have a window into the data from the trial until the trial is over. And that's sort of a hard thing. I will say that having been a site investigator for drugs that have successful positive results in trials, it's very difficult to sort that out during the trial as a site investigator or on a patient-by-patient basis. And so we can be in the midst of a successful trial and still not, have clear evidence of that.
That makes sense. I know we're coming up to our time, but I'd like to ask one more question. And Dr. Ilieva, maybe you can answer first, and Dr. Berry, if you have additional information to add to it. The question is, have you learned anything from this trial design that can be used to make future trials more efficient and encourage more enrollment?
I think that this is the ultimate kind of like, in my experience, trial in terms of encouraging people, shortening the number of people with, who are in placebo arm, pushing simultaneously using the same infrastructure for more than one therapy to be thoroughly evaluated. So I think in the future, I'll be honest with you, other companies, and I say it with respect, a lot of respect towards other companies, but they're facing a tough competition because any company who comes and tries to do things in this market will have to compete with the Healy trial. So the reality is Healy is setting the gold standard. So yeah, if I've learned something, I learned I'm on the good side of, and I've joined the clinical trial, at the good time. So definitely we've learned, and we hope to continue to learn as, data comes out. I mean, the goal is efficacy in treatment. So yeah.
We're so excited. I mean, first of all, we're so excited for the group of investigators that have come together, and then for the huge support from the patient community and the community of people with ALS and caregivers of people with ALS and loved ones. And I think that really does speak to some of the innovation in the trial. And I will also say that, on the trial design committee, we really aim to really try to push the envelope everywhere we can with measures that we're doing at home, for example, home spirometry, which frankly we were sort of interested in, but our COVID really pushed us to do that, and maybe just a better way to do that. And so we're excited to find out. We're also looking at the motor speech outcome, the voice recordings, and how that performs. And Allison, I'll say it again, what you and Catherine do to help get people into the study, remarkable, and we hope will become standard across across trials. So we're really looking for everywhere that we can make improvements that we can. And I will also say a lot of these ideas came from the community of people with ALS. And we are always on the lookout for more ideas. And the way that we get to those ideas is sometimes people saying, this doesn't make sense to me. Or sometimes people say, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but doesn't it seem like there's a better answer? And we can broadly think about that. And the other way is people saying, look, I think there's a different way you could do this that would be, would gain you an edge in one way or another, be better for people in the trial. And so those ideas are so critical.
Yeah, I want to support what Dr. Berry said. In full, that technology will probably be the big game changer for us in the future. If you looked at the map of the ALS centers, we have a big representation on the coast, and there's some sort of like gap in the middle. I mean, it's true, less people live there to begin with, but you wonder what happens, if you're a patient with ALS in the middle of the country and maybe you're too far to travel to, a center and participate, but you still want to contribute and you still want, then this technology, all we're talking about, hopefully, if I'm a futuristic kind of like imaginative person, I would dream that at some point those people will be able to, no longer be excluded, but will be able to participate in, any kind of research activity. And hopefully we don't need to do any more trials in the future too. We will love to have something efficacious. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you, Dr. Ilieva, so much for joining us as our guest today. And Dr. Berry, thanks for all the kind words and support. And thank you for hosting our weekly webinar today. I know we're over the time, so if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out to the patient navigation team and we will get them to the doctors and we will share answers next week. We'll see everybody.
I did see a few questions on Mastinib and something else, so we can answer those questions via email.
Yes, we'll get those done. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.